Have you ever wondered what would happen if presidential pardons weren't actually signed by the president himself? In a stunning twist, President Donald Trump claims that former President Joe Biden's recent pardons might not have come from the president at all, but from a machine. Stick with us until the end, because the answer to the question, can these pardons be overturned if the signature wasn't genuine? This could be the biggest political scandal of the last decade. Welcome back to our channel, where we break down the latest news from the White House in a way every American can understand. Today, we dive into breaking news of President Donald Trump's latest allegations against President Joe Biden's use of pardons. According to President Trump, certain pardons recently issued under Biden's administration might not have been personally signed by Biden. Instead, Trump suggests the signatures on these official documents could have come from something called an Autopen. It's an extraordinary claim, one that, if true, raises questions about the validity of those pardons and whether they could be legally challenged or even overturned. But how legitimate are Trump's concerns? And what does an Autopen actually do? Plus, how long could it take to fight a supposedly non-genuine presidential signature in court? Let's unpack the details. First, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what a presidential pardon is and why it's so important. A presidential pardon is effectively the power for the President of the United States to forgive federal crimes or set aside punishments for those who have been convicted. It is one of the most far-reaching authorities of the presidency, deeply rooted in Article 2 of the US Constitution. Historically, presidents have used pardons to correct perceived injustices or to show mercy. Donald Trump himself issued numerous pardons during his tenure, as did previous presidents, ranging from political allies to people who arguably deserved a second chance. What's crucial here is that the Constitution vests the power in the president, and the president alone. Legally, the president can delegate tasks, but not the power to pardon itself. The question is, if a president uses a mechanical device to apply his signature, does it still count as his personal exercise of that power? Now, let's focus on the claims Trump is making. According to him, Joe Biden's recent pardons are questionable because the official documents may have been signed by an Autopen rather than by Biden's own hand. Trump contends that this situation could invalidate the pardons, as it might indicate that Biden did not personally finalize them. Some might view this claim as an attack or a tactic in the political back and forth between Trump and Biden. Others, however, argue that it brings up important constitutional issues about the authenticity of presidential actions. The main point of Trump's allegation is this: if the president never physically signed the documents, can we say the president personally issued those pardons? What exactly is an Autopen? Simply put, an Autopen is a mechanical or electronic device that can replicate a person's signature. High-level officials, including presidents, have used Autopens for years to sign large volumes of documents like letters, certificates, or other ceremonial paperwork. Some argue there's a practical need for Autopens. After all, being the leader of the free world is a busy job, and certain documents, especially routine or ceremonial acknowledgements, might not require the president's personal touch each and every time. However, critics point out that using an Autopen for legally binding documents, such as pardons or major legislative actions, can raise serious questions about constitutional validity. In 2011, for example, President Barack Obama used an Autopen to sign a piece of legislation while he was out of the country. It caused a wave of debate about whether such a signature is legally binding. The Department of Justice opined that an Autopen signature can be valid if the president expressly authorizes it, but that still leaves room for disputes over how direct and personal that authorization really is. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Trump's allegations are accurate. Joe Biden did not personally sign these pardon documents and instead relied on an Autopen. If that's the case, what does it mean legally and politically? Is it a constitutional crisis? At first glance, it might appear that having the president's signature replicated could lead to a constitutional crisis, where presidential power is exercised not by the individual, but by a mechanical device. However, many legal experts would point out that if Biden authorized the use of the Autopen, it might still hold up in court. Could the pardons be overturned? Presidential pardons are typically final. Once granted, they are rarely undone. But a pardon granted without the president's direct action could be challenged on the grounds that the official procedure wasn't followed. This would be a very unusual and complicated legal battle. If Trump was successful in challenging these Autopen pardons and having them overturned, it would set a gigantic legal precedent. Future presidents might be far more cautious about using Autopens to sign anything that carries significant weight. Now, if Trump or anyone else were to take this claim to the courts, how long would it take to see any action? Legal battles involving constitutional questions can drag on for months or even years. Here's a likely timeline. An initial lawsuit or petition would need to be filed in federal court. The challenge would assert that the pardons are invalid due to an improper signature. A federal judge would hold preliminary hearings to decide whether the lawsuit has standing, for example, whether the challenger has the right to contest these pardons in the first place. The question of whether Biden explicitly authorized the Autopen to sign these pardons would be central. If the administration can show that the president gave clear instructions for the Autopen to be used, a court may still consider the pardons valid. Whatever the initial outcome, expect appeals. Constitutional matters often go up the chain to appellate courts, and sometimes all the way to the Supreme Court. This could easily span a year or more, depending on how determined both parties are to fight it. What is the final verdict? Ultimately, the courts could uphold or invalidate those pardons. If they are invalidated, it would be a first in modern American history and open a brand new chapter in presidential power disputes. You might be thinking, how does this affect me? Well, presidential pardons touch on the balance of power in our government. If a president can delegate the physical act of signing documents to a machine, critics fear it might pave the way for less oversight or accountability. On the flip side, supporters of Autopen usage argue that the president is still the driving force behind the decision whether he physically signs the document or not. For Donald Trump, bringing attention to this issue could serve multiple purposes. Politically, it positions him as someone who is defending the Constitution, at least from his perspective. It also allows him to question the legitimacy of Biden's executive actions, which, in a very polarized political climate, resonates with his supporters. If his challenge gains traction, Biden's administration could face increased scrutiny over how it handled official documents. Already, there's significant focus on the mental and physical agility of President Biden given his age, so claims that he might not have physically signed the pardons only amplify that narrative among critics. Here's the burning question you've stuck around for. If a court finds Biden did not personally sign and did not properly authorize the Autopen usage, could the pardons truly be invalidated? The answer is possibly, but it might be a long shot. The Constitution places the pardon power specifically in the hands of the president if there's a proven procedural irregularity. Like no direct authorization or a lack of personal decision-making, there could be grounds to challenge the pardons in court. Historically, courts have been very deferential when it comes to the president's actions in signing or approving documents. The Department of Justice's own stance is that as long as there's explicit permission, Autopen usage is acceptable. That said, in today's politically charged atmosphere, nothing is off the table. If there's a credible sign that Biden never authorized the Autopen or was unaware of these pardons being signed in his name, then the legal machinery to overturn them could kick into gear, though it could take years for a final outcome. Donald Trump's claims that Joe Biden's pardons might not be valid if they were signed using an Autopen opens a Pandora's box of constitutional and legal concerns. While critics may dismiss it as grandstanding, it does bring up critical questions. Should we be comfortable with mechanical signatures on critical legal documents, even if the president consents to it? Or do we risk undermining the very foundation of presidential authority by allowing machines to replicate the commander-in-chief's signature? Only time, and potentially the courts, will decide. But for now, it's a story to keep a very close eye on, as the repercussions could be monumental. If we see a serious legal challenge, it could shape how future presidents and administrations handle one of the most powerful tools in the Oval Office. Thank you for tuning in today. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more White House news explained in plain English. We'll be here, watching this story unfold and bringing you the latest developments as they happen. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.